Alright, this is video 8 about fresh surface water. So we've finished looking at the oceans, and now we're going to merge into fresh water and see some specifics about the different locales and the different functions that fresh water provides and how necessary it is, even though it is of the 97% of the water on the earth that's salt, only 3% is fresh. The first thing is we're going to look at two terms that may be new to you, and that is watershed and river basin. And they're describing something very similar. It's just the size of the channel of water that is feeding in this watershed or river basin that really makes the difference in how you use the term. Both terms are describing all the land that drains into a river, stream, or lake. And you understand gravity and you understand slope, and water is going to flow downhill and due to the pull of gravity. Water is also going to flow to the lowest lying land, and in most cases the lowest lying land is going to be the river channel, the stream channel, or a lake bed. So river basins are a term that describes a large geographical area that drains into a large river. And a river basin may consist of smaller rivers and many creeks and streams. A watershed is usually going to describe an area with a singular river or a singular stream. And so within a river basin, you may have more than one watershed. For example, in Raleigh, I'll show you a picture of the sign in just a minute, but you may have the Walnut Creek watershed, you may have the Crab Creek watershed, you may have the Swift Creek watershed, and all of these watersheds flow into the Neuse River, which is a much larger river, and the Eno, which is a smaller tributary of the Neuse, is also going to flow into this larger river basin. So these watersheds are going to be smaller land areas with smaller tributaries within the larger river basin. Now, when we think about how water is broken up, we just said that 97% of all the water on the earth is salt water. 3% is fresh. If you break down that fresh, we know that the ice caps and glaciers make up the majority of the fresh water. Groundwater makes up about a third of all the fresh water, and so that only leaves about 1% for all of our rivers, lakes, and streams. Now here is we've got a couple images on this page, but the funnel, if you think about a watershed, is like a large funnel that collects all the water within a drainage area and then channels it to that lowest point, which is going to be the stream bed, the river bed, or the lake bed. A river basin is going to eventually, that water is going to flow into a larger body of water like the Atlantic Ocean. And our river basin, the Neuse, does flow into the Atlantic, but you do have some that flow into larger rivers, like the Ohio River Basin ends up flowing into the Mississippi, and the Mississippi ends up flowing into the Gulf of Mexico. So larger river basins are made up of many interconnected watersheds or smaller basins. I've already mentioned the Neuse River Basin, made up of Crabtree Creek, Swift Creek, and Walnut Creek, for example. The Cape Fear is made up of the Deep River and some other smaller rivers, as well as many creeks such as Cross Creek. These smaller bodies that dump into the larger river basin can be grouped into the category of tributaries. So creeks, streams, and smaller rivers can all be called tributaries. And again, water always runs to the lowest point in the land, which is usually the river, the stream, the lake, or eventually the ocean. So we define a river as a large channel. So if you imagine scooping out a channel of which the water is continually flowing downhill, where it's made of many smaller bodies of water flowing into it. A stream is just a small channel in which water is continually flowing, again, downhill. It's made of small gullies or small channels, and these tributaries are always going to usually dump into a larger river. And then lakes can be open or closed, but it's a body of water that's considerable size, and water has collected in this basin over time. Many times a stream or a river may flow in or out of a lake, but some lakes are closed bodies and do not have an outlet. They may be fed by underground springs. This is a term that's used to describe where you live ecologically, and that is your river basin and watershed. This is out on I-40 on the east side of Garner, and that is the Swift Creek watershed, which is part of the Neuse River Basin. So here is a map of North Carolina's river basins. We are in the Neuse River Basin. The Cape Fear is a little bit south of the Neuse, and if you live in Cary, you may get your water out of the Cape Fear River Basin from Jordan Lake, but then it is returned to the Neuse, and that's an interesting dynamic, which ecologically is not a good decision. We're going to spend some time for a couple of days looking at North Carolina's river basins. Now, the fall line runs down the center of this diagram, separates the Piedmont from the coastal plain. You can see we are on this side of the fall line, and most of the rivers in the coastal plain originate around or above the fall line, and they flow to the east coast and dump into the sound system, the Albemarle-Pamlico Sound, which eventually mixes with the Atlantic Ocean. Most of the rivers that originate in the Piedmont are going to flow west, or they're going to flow southwest, and some of the ones that flow southwest join larger rivers down in South Carolina or Georgia and will end up in the Atlantic Ocean. But the ones in the western part of the state are going to flow west and going to end up into larger rivers, which are going to end up dumping into the Gulf of Mexico. So the fall line is where the elevation changes, and that's going to impact the direction or the flow of the water.